544,000 people. That's how many Americans had $1 million or more in their 401k as of late 2024. According to Fidelity, the single largest 401k administrator in the country. 70 million Americans have a 401k. Do the math. That's less than 1%. But the number that actually made me put my coffee down wasn't that one. It was this. The median 401k balance for Americans aged 55 to 64 people, 3 to 10 years from retirement, who've spent their entire working lives theoretically building toward this moment, is $87,500. Think about that for a second. The median near-retirement worker has saved just enough to cover roughly 2.5 years of average American household spending. That's not a retirement. That's a delay with some paperwork attached. Today, I'm going to tell you exactly what's keeping that number at $87,500, who the 544,000 actually are, and how they got there. And this is the part most finance channels skip entirely. Why the same structural mechanics that trap most people inside the median are the exact same mechanics that make $1 million almost automatic if you understand which 3 variables actually matter. By the way, I built a free early retirement calculator because most of the ones you find online are mathematically dishonest. They use assumptions that would make a Vanguard actuary laugh out loud. Mine uses BlackRock and Vanguard methodology to expose the actual weak points in your specific plan. I only ask for your email to send you the report. I don't store any of your financial data. Link is in the description. Here's the image I want living in your head for everything that follows. Most people treat their 401k like a slot machine. Every paycheck, a little goes in. They pull the lever once a year when HR sends the annual enrollment email. They hope the number goes up. The house takes its cut on every spin through fees, expense ratios, administrative costs silently, invisibly, and most people never feel it leave because it's deducted from returns before the balance is displayed. You never see the money exit. It's just gone, quietly, every year, for 30 years. But the 544,000 who crossed $1 million, they're not playing a slot machine. They're using a vending machine. Specific input, predictable output, no luck, no hoping, no praying to Jerome Powell. Inputs, outputs, and the discipline to keep feeding the machine even when it looks like it's broken. The slot machine versus the vending machine. I'm going to come back to this image repeatedly because it explains almost everything about the gap between the 544,000 and everyone else. In a few minutes, I'm going to walk you through the actual mechanism that's silently draining most 401k accounts. And it is not market crashes. It is not bad stock picks. It's something so boring that nobody ever talks about it, which is exactly what makes it so dangerous. But first, let me show you how broken the baseline picture really is, because it's worse than you've probably heard. Vanguard publishes a report every year called How America Saves. It's the most comprehensive window into 401k behavior in this country. It's freely available, and it is almost completely ignored by the people who should be reading it. The 2024 edition tells you this. Average 401k balance across all participants, $134,128. Median, $35,286. The average is dragged upward by the rare accounts. With enormous balances, the 544,000 millionaires skew the mean significantly. The median is the honest number. For the median American with a 401k, total accumulated retirement savings is $35,000. Not per year. The whole thing, the entire account, $35,000. And for the age group that should have the most accumulated, 55 to 64, people who have been working and presumably contributing since the early 90s, the average is $244,750, and the median is $87,571. Half the people in that age bracket have less than $90,000 as they approach the end of their working life. Not because they weren't trying, because the system they were operating inside was quietly working against them in ways they were never shown. Now, I want to introduce you to Marcus. Marcus is a mid-level project manager at a regional insurance company in Ohio. He makes $80,000 a year. He's been contributing 6% of his salary to his 401k since the day he started, because that's the threshold for the full employer match, and the benefits orientation told him not to leave free money on the table. He's in a target date fund that adjusts its allocation as he gets older. He checks his balance twice a year, maybe. It's going up, slowly. He feels responsible. His financial advisor, the one who comes in for the quarterly HR financial wellness workshop, told Marcus he was on track. On track for what, exactly? Marcus has never asked. He's been feeding the slot machine for 12 years, and the slot machine is running, and the lights are on, and that feels like progress. Marcus is going to retire at 65 with somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000 if he doesn't change anything. His advisor will show him charts. Neither of them will clearly articulate how the system worked against Marcus the entire time. We'll come back to Marcus. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you why the advice Marcus got contribute enough for the match. Pick a diversified fund, don't panic is technically correct and practically insufficient. But first, the boring weapon. The one that's draining more money from more 401k accounts than any market crash in history. Expense ratios. The annual fee that a mutual fund charges to manage your money expressed as a percentage of your total balance. The average expense ratio for actively managed mutual funds inside 401k plans runs between 0.7 and 1% per year. A total market index fund, the kind Vanguard and Fidelity offer, costs roughly 0.03 to 0.04% per year. That gap is approximately 1%. And over time, that 1% is one of the most quietly destructive forces in personal finance. Here's the math, because I am not going to wave my hands at something this important. You have $200,000 in your 401k today. You earn 7% annual returns before fees. Over 30 years, with an expense ratio of 0.03%, you accumulate approximately $1,490,000. With an expense ratio of 1%, common, normal, found inside millions of plans across this country, you accumulate approximately $1,140,000. The difference is $350,000. $350,000 that left your account without a bill, without a notification, without a single line item that said, we took this. The compounding ran against you instead of for you, and you never saw it happen. I'll be honest with you. The first time I ran this calculation for my own situation, it was one of those moments where you laugh and feel slightly nauseous at the same time. $350,000, not because of bad investing, because of a number that appears in the 5th column of a fund fact sheet that most people have never opened. Now, here's what makes this particularly funny in a bleak, amused, disappointment kind of way. The funds inside your 401k were not chosen by you. They were chosen by your employer, typically with the assistance of a plan administrator. And that plan administrator's incentives are not always precisely identical to your retirement outcome. Some administrators receive revenue sharing from fund families whose products appear in the plan. Completely legal, quite cozy. The result is that some 401k plans are excellent low-cost options, broad index fund coverage, clean menus, and some plans are, to use a technical term, graveyards. High-fee, actively managed funds that have underperformed their benchmark for a decade, offered by an administrator who has a long-standing relationship with that fund family. And the employee, Marcus, you, anyone, receives a drop-down menu with 25 options and picks the one that sounds the most reassuring. The SPIVA report, Standard & Poor's Indices versus Active, releases data on this every year. In 2023, approximately 90% of actively managed large-cap funds underperformed the S&P 500 index over the prior 20-year period. 90%. And the majority of 401k participants are invested in funds that belong to that 90%, paying fees for the underperformance. Nearly 60% of 401k participants don't know the expense ratios of the funds they're in, according to data from the Employee Benefit Research Institute. 60% of people who are trusting an account they can barely see inside to fund the last 30 years of their life don't know one of the most important variables in the entire equation. That's not a criticism of those people. It's a description of a system that was never designed to make the costs visible. The slot machine doesn't show you the payout table. That's not an accident. That's the architecture. By the way, hit subscribe if you like this content. Otherwise, YouTube's algorithm has essentially no reason to show you my videos again. And I'd like to think what I'm telling you is worth more than a free click. Now, this is where most personal finance content stops. They tell you expense ratios matter, they point you toward index funds, they declare victory. But if that information were sufficient, more than 1% of 401k holders would have $1 million. The information has been available for a long time. Jack Bogle was evangelizing low-cost index funds since the 1970s. Vanguard has been running the total market index fund since 1976. The information was not the bottleneck. The bottleneck is psychology. And this is the thing that genuinely separates the 544,000 from everyone else. Here's the reversal. You think the problem is that people don't know enough about money. But the actual problem is that people know enough and still make the same mistakes. Because those mistakes are not driven by ignorance. They're driven by how the brain is wired. Financial mistakes aren't math problems. They're brain problems. There's a principle in behavioral economics called hyperbolic discounting. It describes the human tendency to value near-term rewards far more steeply than future ones, in a way that is mathematically irrational. If you offer most people $100 today, or $115 in 2 weeks, many will take the 100 today. Even though a 15% 2-week return is the greatest investment opportunity in the history of finance, the brain doesn't feel the future value, it only feels the present one. 401k contributions are a daily battle against hyperbolic discounting. Every paycheck, you surrender real money, money that could become dinner, a weekend, a new thing for a reward you will not touch for decades. Your brain finds this profoundly unnatural. The math is overwhelming in favor of contributing more today. But the math is not the decision maker. The limbic system is. This is why, during the 2020 crash, when markets dropped roughly 34% in 33 days, in February and March, millions of Americans stopped contributing to their 401k accounts or moved to cash. The near-term pain was vivid and immediate. The long-term cost of stopping contributions was abstract and distant. Hyperbolic discounting at population scale during a crisis. And the people who could not hold the abstract future value clearly enough to keep feeding the machine, they miss the recovery. The S&P 500 hit its low on March 23rd, 2020. A year later, it was up over 75% from that bottom. The people who kept contributing through the panic effectively bought the bottom without ever trying to time the market. They didn't know when the low was coming. They didn't need to know. They fed the machine, and the machine rewarded them. Here's a mock conversation that I think captures the energy of that moment accurately. Financial advisor, you should stay in the market. Historically, staying the course outperforms panic selling. Client, the market is down 34% in a month. Financial advisor, yes. Client, and your advice is to keep putting money in? Financial advisor, yes. Client, I'll move to cash until it stabilizes. Financial advisor, that conversation happened millions of times in March of 2020. The clients who moved to cash locked in the loss. They then watched the market recover and held off re-entering because every week felt like the wrong time to buy back in. Some of them are still underinvested now because they never found the moment that felt safe. The slot machine ran without them. The vending machine ran for the people who didn't stop. Stay with me, because this next part changes everything about how you think about the $1 million number. Let me give you the framework I use to think about where any given 401k participant actually stands. I call it the 4 levels of 401k participation. And critically, these levels are not about income. I have met people earning $200,000 a year who are at level 1. I've met people earning $55,000 a year who are at level 3. These levels are about what you understand and what you've acted on. Level 1 is the ignorer. Auto-enrolled at 3% by their employer. Never changed anything. Has no idea what they're invested in, what it costs, or what their balance is within a reasonable approximation. Their contribution is determined entirely by inertia. If auto-enrollment defaulted them to 3%, that's where they are. This is the most common type of 401k participant. Not because these people are careless. Many of them are high-performing, analytically capable professionals. The 401k is just not the thing they focused on. and the system was designed to require minimal attention, which means minimal optimization. Level 2 is the complier. They contribute enough to get the full employer match. They picked a fund at some point, probably a target date fund, because it sounded like the one decision option and they haven't revisited the choice. They feel like they're doing what they're supposed to. They're pulling the lever consistently. They're playing the slot machine responsibly. The complier will almost certainly not retire with $1 million unless they work into their late 60s and the market cooperates and their expenses in retirement turn out to be lower than they projected. They have the sensation of being on track without having a specific destination. Level 3 is the optimizer. They max their contribution or come close to it. They've looked at the expense ratios in their plan. They chose the lowest cost index fund available. They know what their vesting schedule looks like on the employer match, and they've never left unvested money behind when changing jobs. The optimizer plays the vending machine. They put in the right inputs. They leave it alone. They don't stop contributing during crashes. This is where the 544,000 live. Level 4 is the architect. They've done everything the optimizer does, plus they're thinking about account type, traditional pre-tax versus Roth after tax, with a genuine view on which serves their specific tax situation better. They understand how the 401k interacts with a Roth IRA, a taxable brokerage account, maybe a SEP IRA if they have self-employment income. They're not contributing to an account. They're designing a tax-efficient system that extracts maximum lifetime wealth from the rules as they exist. This is where the people with multiple millions in retirement accounts live. Most financial content, including mine, I'll be honest, talks to level 3. The mainstream advice to max your contributions and pick low-cost index funds is correct. It's also incomplete because it doesn't address why most people are stuck at level 1 or 2. And that's almost never a knowledge problem. Now I want to tell you about Dennis. Dennis is real in the composite sense. He's built from patterns I've observed in enough real situations that the specific details have been adjusted, but the mechanics are intact. Dennis started his career in the mid-90s. Engineering background, solid company, salary that would be considered good by any reasonable measure. He contributed to his 401k from day one. He was never an ignorer. He was a complier from the start. In 2001, he left his job to join a startup. He cashed out his 401k. The balance at the time was $45,000. He paid approximately $17,000 in combined income tax and early withdrawal penalty. He used the remaining $28,000 to cover living expenses while the startup found its footing. Here's the actual math on that decision. $45,000 in a total market index fund in 2001, compounding at 7% annually through 2025, would be worth approximately $248,000 today. He paid $17,000 in exit costs to forfeit $248,000 in future value. The cost of that one decision was not $17,000. It was $248,000 paid in slow motion over 24 years, silently, invisibly, with no moment where it felt like a loss. Dennis is 51. His current 401k balance is about $230,000. He has been contributing consistently since 2003. His expense ratio was 0.78% on a target date fund until last year, when he found out by accident, while trying to figure out why his returns were slightly below the index, that his plan offered a total market index fund at 0.04%. Nobody had told him. It wasn't in any email. It wasn't highlighted during orientation. He found it by reading a fund comparison sheet buried in the plan's document portal. He switched. On a $230,000 balance, the fee difference is approximately $1,700 per year that now stays in his account and compounds instead of flowing to the fund company. Over the next 15 years, with compounding, that switch is worth somewhere between $80,000 and $120,000. Better late than never. Not as good as never having paid 0.78% for 22 years. Dennis recently asked his financial advisor for a specific projected number, not a general comfort level. The advisor produced a range. The bottom of the range was lower than Dennis had been picturing. The top of the range required assumptions that Dennis described as, quote, aggressively optimistic. Dennis is now at level 2.5. He's moving toward 3. He's not going to retire with $1 million, but he's going to retire with significantly more than he would have if he'd never asked the specific question. The slot machine doesn't respond to questions. The vending machine does. Now, let me run the case study that I think makes all of this concrete. Jordan is 34, $90,000 salary, $28,000 currently in a 401k. The employer matches 50% of contributions, up to 6% of salary, so the match ceiling is $2,700 per year. Jordan currently contributes exactly 6%, $5,400 per year. With the match, total annual input is $8,100. Jordan is at level 2. Getting the full match feels responsible. Scenario 1, Jordan stays exactly here, contributes 6% until 65-31 years, 7% average annual returns. Final balance, approximately $1,080,000. That number looks fine. It looks like a win. But 2% average inflation over 31 years means $1,080,000 in 2056 has the purchasing power of about $541,000 in today's money. Jordan has the number, but not the retirement. The slot machine produced a big pile of chips. At the cashier window, they're worth half what Jordan thought. Scenario 2. Jordan jumps to level 3 at 34, bumps contributions to 15%, $13,500 per year. Employer match stays the same. Total annual input, $16,200. Same 7% returns over 31 years. Final balance, approximately $2,680,000. Inflation adjusted to today's purchasing power, about $1.47 million. That's not a retirement that might work out. That's financial independence. The difference in monthly take-home pay between scenario 1 and scenario 2, Jordan gives up roughly $550 per month, $18 a day, roughly the cost of 2 restaurant lunches, in exchange for receiving an extra $1,600,000 at retirement. That is the vending machine in its purest form. Input, $550 per month of foregone spending. Output, $1,600,000 additional dollars after 31 years. The machine doesn't care whether you believe in it. It works anyway. But Jordan can't afford to give up $550 a month. This is the objection I hear most. And sometimes genuinely, not dismissively, it's true. There are real financial constraints for real people. But the behavioral economics literature on this is revealing. In the majority of cases, it is not actually a cash flow problem. It is a present bias problem. The $550 is concrete today. The $1.6 million is abstract and distant. Hyperbolic discounting, again. The brain negotiates away a fortune in exchange for $18 a day and spending flexibility because the fortune doesn't feel real and the $18 does. This is also why automatic contribution increases the feature that some 401k plans offer, where your contribution rate goes up by 1% every year unless you opt out, have been shown to dramatically increase long-term balances. You're using inertia instead of fighting it. The default becomes the machine, and the machine keeps running. Here's what I've found, looking at the patterns behind high 401k balances. The 544,000 who've crossed $1 million share 3 things that have almost nothing to do with extraordinary income or superhuman discipline. First, continuous time in market. Not continuous perfect behavior. Continuous presence. The contributions didn't stop during 2008. They didn't stop during 2020. They didn't stop when the startup looked rocky, or the marriage got expensive, or the news was genuinely terrifying. Not because these people were immune to fear, they weren't, but because the contribution was automatic enough that stopping it would have required a deliberate act. The default was to keep going, inertia, again, running in the right direction. Second, low expense ratios. Boring, cheap funds, not smart funds, not tactical funds, not the fund that did 22% last year. Boring, cheap, broad index funds held for decades. The gap between a 0.03% expense ratio and a 0.85% expense ratio on a $500,000 balance earning 7% annually is approximately $4,100 per year in fees alone. Over 20 years, with compounding, that's roughly $175,000 for choosing a different fund code on a drop-down menu. Third, they never cashed out. No early withdrawal, no I'll make it back. The account was treated as untouchable because the math on early withdrawal is not a $17,000 penalty. It's a $248,000 loss paid across 24 years. The way Dennis learned, these three things are the vending machine. They are specific, reproducible, boring inputs that produce specific, reproducible, boring outputs. There is no alpha here. There is no edge. There is only the discipline to keep feeding a machine that the majority of participants abandon, reduce, or sabotage at precisely the moments when the machine needs the input most. Here is another brief conversation that I think accurately describes what most financial wellness programs look like. New employee at benefits orientation. What should I pick from the fund options? HR representative. The target date fund is a great all-in-one. New employee. What's the expense ratio on that fund? HR representative. Great question. Let me follow up with you on that. They never follow up. The employee picks the target date fund. The expense ratio is 0.75%. Nobody mentions the index fund option at 0.05%. That's sitting 3 lines below it in the menu. That's the entire subplot of the American retirement system. Condensed to a 30-second conversation, lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. I have multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars invested. I've been running my own business for over 10 years, surrounded by accountants and tax attorneys who explain to me in very patient and sometimes exasperated detail how money actually moves inside institutions, plans, and tax code. And the single most boring, unremarkable, undramatic component of my financial life, low-cost index funds, inside tax advantage accounts, fed automatically on every paycheck, never touched during market dislocations, is also the thing that is compounded most consistently and produced the most meaningful long-term outcome. No edge, no cleverness, the vending machine, running. The people who pitch you complicated strategies, the options course, the sector rotation system, the I made 31% last year and here's how YouTube thumbnail are. Almost without exception, playing a slot machine with higher stakes and describing the experience as skill. Some of them got lucky. Most of them look lucky until they don't. The market is extremely efficient at eventually correcting that confusion. The median near retirement worker has $87,500 saved. The median, half of 55 to 64-year-olds have less than that. Meanwhile, the financial media is running segments on small cap international rotation, rate cut implications for bond duration, and which sector ETF outperformed in the last quarter. None of that matters. Not 1% of it matters. If your expense ratio is 0.85%, you cashed out in 2001, and you're contributing 6% instead of 15%. The signal is buried under decades of noise that benefits the noise generators. Not through malice, through aligned incentives. There are an estimated 29 million orphaned 401k accounts in the United States. Old plans from old jobs, sitting in default allocations, accumulating fees, getting zero attention from anyone. The estimated total balance in forgotten accounts exceeds $1 trillion. Dennis found one of his, $12,000, sitting in a stable value fund at 0.4% annual growth for 17 years. What it would have been worth in a total market index fund over the same period, approximately $38,000. He found it through the Department of Labor's abandoned plan database. The rollover took 40 minutes. The opportunity cost of not doing it sooner was $26,000. The slot machine ran in an empty room for 17 years and produced 0.4%. That's the other version of the system working against you. Not dramatically, not violently, just quietly, while you weren't looking. 3 things I want you to actually do, specific to this, not generic. 1, this week, not someday, this week, Log into your 401k and find the expense ratio on every fund you're currently holding. They're in the fund fact sheets, usually one click away from the fund name. Write down the numbers. If your plan includes anything under 0.15%, that's where your allocation probably belongs. If everything in your plan is above 0.5%, ask HR why low-cost index options aren't available. They may not know. The question itself creates accountability pressure. 2, run the Jordan calculation for yourself. Take your current contribution rate, project it forward to 65 at 7%, then deflate the result by 2% per year for inflation over the same time horizon. Look at what that final number actually buys in today's purchasing power. If it looks like the retirement you want, great, you've confirmed your current trajectory. If it doesn't, and for the majority of people at level 1 and 2, it won't calculate the specific monthly dollar amount it would take to change the outcome meaningfully. Give the problem a concrete number. The brain can negotiate with a specific number. It cannot negotiate with vague future discomfort. 3, if you've left a 401k at an old employer, and statistically, there's a real chance you have roll it over into your current plan or an IRA today, not after the weekend. The rollover process typically takes less time than setting up a streaming subscription, and the compounding cost of delay is real and permanent. The $544,000 didn't get there because they're smarter. They got there because at some point, something made the slot machine visible for what it was. A system designed to look like a retirement vehicle while quietly extracting value from participants who didn't know where to look. Once you see the mechanism, you can stop hoping and start inputting. The vending machine doesn't care if you believe in it. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. Marcus is going to read a fun fact sheet this week, or he isn't. Dennis already switched his allocation and is running the rollover now. Jordan ran the numbers and felt the specific uncomfortable weight of $550 a day against $1.6 million over 31 years, and the concrete number made the choice feel real in a way the abstract future never did. The median will stay at $87,500. Because most people never look at the payout table on the slot machine. They've been playing for 30 years. You looked, that's the whole game.